Hi guys, welcome to tonight's webinar. Tonight we're going to be looking at teaching task 3C, part of the A2 Music Tech coursework for edXL. This one is fantastic, probably my favourite out of all of them. And we talk about A2 being all about professional practice. And this one is just that. This one, you can expect to see these kind of projects in a proper working environment. And I think, you know, when edXL were thinking about this all them years back, they absolutely knocked this one on the head. They got this one right on the head. It's a brilliant piece of work, and you get to use all of your skills that you've learned over the last 2 years and just go for broke on this one. So, just before we get started, then let me just tell you what we've been up to this week. Sam has just published a score for Ready for the Floor for the Task 3A coursework, as well as Next to Me, which was finished just a couple of weeks back. So he's been really working hard. We're still motoring through the Task 1A course. Had a question today about all the extra effects for Task 1A. I will be covering them, but just bear with me on that. But that's going really well. We've almost finished the whole score now, so not long before that's all done. So, where are we at this week? Same drill as always. We'll look at the mark scheme. Just make sure we get you comfortable with where to find the mark scheme, which is the most important thing. Making sure you guys read through it and look at that. The time management, it's always such a big thing that we always look at. Making sure that everything kind of happens at the right time in the coursework, and if it's falling behind, making sure that you're giving your students the right kick in the right direction to get it back on track. We'll also look at what the students need to know, which is massive. Okay, no exceptions. What they need to know is massive for this one. So we just need to make sure that as they come through the AS course and as they hit the A2 course, that we've done all the proper preparation. Now I'll give you a few tips about how I deal with that. We'll then look briefly at the logbook. We'll have a look at the portfolio as well, just to see if we've missed anything during the Q&A session. And once again, please feel free to drop a Q&A. We are live on Hangouts tonight. We've activated the new Q&A plugin, so please feel free to send us a Q&A and get involved. Okay. So the brief. With 3C, you get a choice of 3 briefs as per usual, and there's certain stipulations that you're going to get for each one. They're slightly different, so make sure you read the brief in the portfolio very carefully, decipher it with your students. You know, don't let them wander on this alone. I still, at this stage, I still try and direct my students down one route. If they decide not to take the route that I would like them to go into, that's absolutely fine. But what they need to know is backtracking is really hard. And I tend to kind of cover one piece of coursework, and I'll do that with them because obviously it would take me too long to kind of cover all 3. And the students know that, and they understand that actually if they want my full undivided support, then they can follow me down the direction that I would take it in. Okay, and I'll explain to you the one that I'm going to do this year for this particular project. But once again, the students are free to do all of them, but I do kind of emphasize the point of trying not to backtrack. Okay, so this one is worth 40 marks. Unlike the AS Task 1C, there is no marks for the logbook. The logbook can be quite tricky, and you should always answer yes to every single question. If you answer no, you're going to lose marks, no ifs or buts about that. And you should be aiming to use every device available to you to do with music technology. So here's a list of some of the things that you should be combining and you should be using within this brief. So making sure they use MIDI, just like in Task 1A, Task 3A, make sure they use MIDI. They're allowed now to use samples, they're allowed now to use loops. Making sure they take control of those samples and make them their own is really important. Shaping the envelopes and kind of adding effects and all the rest of it to those samples is really important. Using live audio. It's not a sequence. This task is not a sequence. And I'll say that 3 times. This task is not a sequence. You are allowed to use live audio. If they want to take this in a almost live audio way, they're allowed to do that. They can kind of, you know, create it around a band if they want to, and then filter in all of the MIDI and all of the samples and all the effects and all the acoustics and any synthesis they want to do, but they can base it around audio, so it's really good. A lot of my students get confused at that. They really want to take it down a sequencing route, and they sit in front of their computers and they try and work all this stuff out, and then about 2 months down the line they say to me, oh, so I'd be much better if I could work this out on the guitar. And at that point, I kind of hit my head against the wall and say, you're allowed to. You know, anything goes in this one. You create music and you compose music the way you want to naturally. Okay? So get them into that frame of mind. And it is a different frame of mind to what we're used to in previous examples. It's very much a professional task, this one. Something that they will approach if they take the route of a music producer or music engineer or a songwriter, etc. So it must use original sound synthesis. There's no arranging in this task, and there must be a high quality of recording and capture. So you must have the balances, the mix, the EQ, the filtering, the dynamics, the stereo field, the effects, all bundled into this. We're looking completely and utterly high-end recording or high-end production. Okay, so the mark scheme, very similar to 1C. You've got these compulsory marks which are going to be marked out, responding to the brief, making sure the students understand that the brief they've chosen, make sure they dissect it, make sure they kind of look into kind of all the aspects of the brief and they follow it emotionally. And that sounds a bit weird, but they should follow it emotionally, very much like if they choose the Nelson Mandela one, which is the one I'm going to recommend. They need to understand the frame of mind that he may have been in when he was thinking about these things. So emotional impact of the music is very, very necessary, and they need to kind of get into that frame of mind to kind of write for those kind of a piece of music. Looking at the style, looking at the coherency of the style. So if they decide to go down the pop route with those particular lyrics, that's absolutely fine, but they need to mould it into a very specific style, making sure that they've taking consideration of all the kind of elements that they need. The manipulation of sound is a big one. There's 6 marks for this, especially if you take one where it requires you to use sampling and sample 6 audio samples or 6 vocal samples. The manipulation of sound is massive, and you're really kind of getting your students to think about using reverse phrasings, you know, so they record something in and then they reverse it. You're getting them to think about chopping up phrasing and mixing and matching it. You're thinking about these loops, you're thinking about kind of echo delay, reverbs, putting it through vocoders. All of these kind of ways in which we would naturally think about manipulation have to be explored, okay? So you're going to have to do a lot of prep work on this. And one thing I always say to any teacher that asks me about 3Cs is don't leave them on their own with this. You know, don't assume that they can do this work, because half as often as not, they're going to hit brick walls from week 1, okay? And it's really important they don't hit those brick walls and they keep pushing through this. The last one in the compulsory is the quality. As said before, it's high-end production. And then we start looking at the composing behind this brief. So you're going to get 5 optional marks, all of which will be marked, but the examiner will take the top 3, okay? So, you know, there's no need to focus on one specific one or 3 specific ones. All 5 of them will be marked, okay? And the top 3 will be taken from that. We can just briefly go over to the mark scheme now and just see if there's any kind of snagging points you need to look at, okay? So just bear with me while I just change my screen over. Oh my goodness, where is it? Mark, but there it is. Right, we're almost there. Sorry about that. Here we go. Okay, so we're looking at the mark book again, and ignore this top one, that's part of 3B, okay? So we're just going to go past that, sorry. Here we go. So, moving on to the next page. Same as before, same as every single task, I always give my students the marks. I always give them a marking booklet for all coursework, and I show them how things are going to be marked, just so they look at the snagging points. You know, always start with a low band. You know, is your product a weekend product? You know, does it meet the satisfications of the actual exam criteria? Is there technical problems? Is there insufficient work been submitted? All of those things are going to hit you massively if you haven't fit the brief to what it says, and there is a very specific time limit to this brief. Depending on the one you choose, normally it's exactly 3 minutes. However, I think there is one this year that is 3 minutes 20. So be very aware of that. It's a very specific brief, and going even a couple of seconds out will start to lose the students' marks, because it's thought of as an audio-visual task that's meant for broadcast. And once again, going back to that professional aspect of it, they're very specific about the timings. It has to fit into the broadcast schedule, which means it has to be exactly a certain length of time, okay? So make sure that they're very aware of that. If they go over by 2 seconds, they will start to lose marks. Or if they go under by a certain amount of seconds, they will lose marks. So make sure, read the brief. Like I said, there is one this year that's slightly over. I can't remember which one it is, but we'll have a look at that in a minute. So the holistic one is the one that will be referred to after the detailed. So the examiner will go through the detailed mark scheme first, and they'll ring each of these off. So is the composition too short? So straight away, this is where you're going to not reflect the brief properly. If it is too short, or a limited response to the brief, it's only 1 mark. Simple as that. Identify that with the students, make sure they know that. Only a few of the elements of the brief have been realised, so making sure the emotional impact, especially if you choose the Nelson Mandela one, has been realised. And go into that. Make sure they've used the right keys and make sure they've used the right kind of chord sequences. So going down a very happy route might not necessarily be appropriate, and so on. How they sculpture these feelings is very important, because we're going from a dark place into a light place almost, aren't we? So there's troubles, and it's overcoming adversity, and they need to understand those emotional elements behind the theme and portray them in their music. So working through this, insufficient development of ideas. If there's too many loops, if there's too many parts that are so samey, you're going to lose marks. End of story. Get them to read these lower bands. Underline these key elements. I always get my students to do this. Underline these key elements. If it reaches that, you don't get marks. Simple as that. Manipulation of sound. There will be key elements. Look at what they need. A full sonic palette. You're looking at a lot of stuff going in there. You're looking at sound shaping, MIDI, sampling, vocoders, synthesis. The whole works are going into that, and so on. Okay, and then just going through these, just make sure the students know they're aware of all the limitations. Make sure they understand how this piece will be marked. They'll soon come back to you and say, "So you didn't tell me that. Oh, so I didn't know that." If you're not completely clear with them, and my students respond very, very well to kind of me approaching it this way. Okay. And once again, if you need the mark scheme, it is on the Edexcel website. You can also get it from the overview pages on musictechstudent.co.uk. So please feel free to download it. Let's go back then. Okay. So this is the one that I'm going to be doing this year. It's this Nelson Mandela brief. I quite like this. A Walk to Freedom, and it's based around the lyrics in front of us. I'm not sure they're all. I just like the picture, so I put it up there. But this is the bulk of it. There's also a couple more. In the past, the music video or the actual video that they've given us has never been one that scores particularly high. I've always found in the past that my students that have taken on the music video or the video item, I think last year was called Picnic. Was that last year? Yeah, I think last year was Picnic. And what was the year before? No, sorry, I think last year was the music video and the year before was Picnic, where it was the sequence of events, kind of like a time traveller type thing. And both years, the students that have taken on those roles generally haven't scored very high marks. I think that'll be slightly different this year. The brief of City by the Sea is very much kind of a time-lapse thing where kind of it goes night to day, I believe, and kind of just stays in one position. It kind of get this idea of a city moving by at night. So it could be quite nice to do, and I think you might get a bit better that year. I think Edexcel realised that actually that is the harder one of the brief. That's why I try to avoid that like the plague. Where are you from? Didn't really interest me. I couldn't really see that. I couldn't get my head around that one. Maybe if you guys have got some ideas about that, maybe send us in a post about that, because I couldn't see how that one was going to work for me massively. Talking about kind of elements of where you lived and kind of things that happened about where you were at. So but maybe maybe the one that I really loved was this Nelson Mandela one. This Walk to Freedom. So that's the one I've gone for. Now, same as always, we tend to do lots of preparation. Now, I will start this particular task in term 1, but I will also give my students a summer task. So when they're in the term 6 of their AS year, I give them a summer task. The summer tasks are on Music Tech Student, so please go and have a look at them. There's 3 of them. They're 1-minute tasks, and it just gets them to explore lyrics. It gets them to explore shaping sound, and they make 3 1-minute compositions. They're quite interesting. I think your students will find them very interesting, but it just gets them thinking about the mindset behind what's expected very early on. So before we even start in term 1, I will get them to do a summer task for this. So they will be given those 3 projects, and in the first couple of weeks of term 1, they will present their work from their summer task. So that's something I will do. And then we go into research and planning. Looking at the lyrics, dissecting them, looking at kind of the structure behind the piece, and setting up mood boards. You know, we'll listen to lots of musical examples for inspiration. For this one, you know, I'll probably show them something like Shawshank Redemption, and we'll get thinking about the moods that who was it? Thomas Newman again, I think, one of my favourite composers. I think some of the moods that he was portraying were very simple timbres. So that we will listen to a lot of examples and get them thinking about moods and get them thinking about how to compose for certain scenarios. And we'll go through a lot. You will have to go through a lot of the compositional skills. Music Tech students don't tend to be as savvy as as music students when it comes to composing. Well, this is certainly my ones. Hopefully you've got some that really love composing and they'll get straight onto it. So, but for mine, they do need a lot of guidance with the compositional skills. And I tend to get one of the music teachers in to kind of help me with that as well, just to make sure I don't kind of limit them in their approaches to this. As said previously, make your choice wisely. I tend to guide my students. Not all of them take to it, and a lot of them rebel, and that's fine. But I do say, look, if you're going to choose the one that you're choosing, there's not a lot of room for error. You need to kind of focus on that, you know, and work through all the problems and don't backtrack too heavily. Okay. Now, so as said before, how are we going to go about researching? I always start these mood boards. I love the ideas, just having an ideas board, and we'll chuck loads and loads of ideas down, and some of which we'll use, some of which we won't. Okay, but we will kind of look at the structure that we could compose around our 3 minutes. We'll look at the kind of tempo and any kind of tempo changes. Now, the examiners love this idea of getting tempo changes and time signature changes. And there are some that really work, there's some that don't work. So, you know, when you're going through your composition ideas with them, you know, illustrate this. Actually, you can have tempo changes, you can have time signature changes, and they can really push and pull at the piece and kind of add another dimension. And when it says in the mark scheme that it's too repetitive or it's kind of uninteresting, I think one of the words was, that's something that's going to change that. It's going to change that perspective. So it's one thing they can look at. Rhythm ideas, riff ideas, chord patterns, chord structures. Orchestration's a big one. A lot of my students get confused with this because they think, okay, if I'm going to have 10 instruments, those 10 instruments are going to play throughout the whole piece. And actually showing them that actually, if you take just a couple of them and you keep changing them around and mixing with the orchestration of the piece and changing parts onto different instruments, that it can change the mood of the piece. And don't take for granted that they know how to do that. As simple as orchestrating is, the students tend not to kind of grasp that straight off. You know, if a guitar's got the riff, it will stay on the riff, you know, rather than thinking, actually, now drop the guitar out and let's put it on, say, a violin, or let's put it on some other kind of instrument. So orchestration is a massive part of this as well, especially if you go for the more soundscapey approach. Effects processing and technologies are given. You're going to have to use a lot of that. Walk them through some of them, get them to view some tutorials, get them thinking about how to use technology in their piece. Remember, everything goes. The logbook, no massive surprise in the logbook. Questions 8 and 9, there's no marks for it, but it can be quite tricky. So we'll just head over to the logbook now, just have a look, see what kind of little surprises. And my students do tend to struggle ever so slightly with the logbook. So here it is. Here's the logbook. Once again, as said, if there's information that you can complete, you should complete it. This information on the front here, I'll get them to fill this information in straight away. They may not necessarily know the title of the composition or the brief that they're choosing, but they will definitely know, or I will definitely know this information. So we'll get that filled in straight away. It saves time later on. Now, as said before, you can't answer no to any of these questions. If the answer to these questions is no, you're limiting yourself to getting mediocre marks, okay? So get them to look through the mark scheme and says, okay, did you use any sample loops? If the answer is no, well, don't you think you should put some in? Don't you think you should try and put some in? Don't you think you should have a look at manipulating some loops or kind of working with something like that? And then we're going to write about it, okay? Next one, have we used any individual samples? Absolutely. It should always be yes, and then you should always kind of answer the question, okay? Get them to realize this from day one, that they will need to use loops, they will need to use samples, they will need to use synthesis, they will need to use audio tracks, they will need to use effects and processing, they will need to use MIDI editing and shaping. There is no getting around that. And if they see this, they say, because a lot might say, oh, I'm just going to answer no to it. I say, well, that's fine, but you're going to lose marks. You can't physically get into the top band if you're answering no to any of those questions. A commercial piece of music should be using everything available to them, or a commercial soundscape or a commercial kind of composition should be using every source available to them. You would never see a musician limiting themselves in that way, and that's why they've kind of put these marks in. So relatively simple to fill in, nothing too major. Show the students this early, and they will definitely thank you for it, because then they can plan putting all these parts in, and it can become part of their mood board, you know, or their ideas board. Okay, where are we at? I think that brings us to the end. Just to say, if we've got any questions, please chuck us a question on the Q&A, and I'll answer it in just a second. Just to say, you should be monitoring your students' progression now. What you're going to find is we're getting in now, we're very close to term 2. Term 1, there's lots of momentum. There's lots of kind of, yeah, we're getting on with this, we're really enjoying it. By the end of term 1, that momentum, that kind of enthusiasm starts to drop. And it can't, okay? Now you need to be setting them really strict deadlines that they complete. And the only way they're going to complete those deadlines is if they know that you're going to monitor it. If you don't monitor it and put in some kind of sanctions for the ones that don't commit themselves, you'll start to find that people start to sit back a little bit. And once we get into term 2, you're already, or towards the end of term 2, you're already over halfway through the course, okay? So start thinking about that now, making sure that the bulk of the work, well, at the moment, where we're at kind of my centre at the moment, task 3B is pretty much all recording, we've started mixing it. Task 3C, all the ideas are down and they're kind of getting shaped, and now I'm making them put their structures into place and kind of pushing them forward in that way. And then probably next week, or the first week of term 2, I will start doing all the work for task 3A. So that's where I'm at in my centre. So I've already kind of got 2 of the pieces almost done to a good standard. We're looking probably 20 to 25 marks for both of them at the minute, depending on the student. So the next one, we're just about to start that now. But by Christmas, if the momentum stays with me and kind of the enthusiasm stays with me, we should be looking at having all 3 pieces to a kind of 25 marks out of 40 stage. And then we've got 1 term to kind of refine all of them, and start all, well, obviously next time we'll start a lot of the exam prep. We've already done quite a few of the exam preps, and we'll go through that as well. So hopefully that helps. Now let's just have a look, see if they've got any questions. What does it say? Okay, can you recommend a good place to get samples? This is a good question, actually. There's one that I like. Can I answer that here? Okay, there's one sample place that I like that's free, that's freesound.org. As per most free things, it's not as easy to find all the good stuff. But freesound.org has got some really nice, interesting stuff available. So, please feel free, go over there. As it says, it's free, and it's completely free. It's an open source thing, and I come across it a few years ago because we was doing some bits and pieces with some of the Blender Foundation projects, which, if you haven't seen, blender.org is a piece of software for 3D artists, and they create these films, and basically they were using the freesound.org for something. I can't remember what they were using it for, but that's how I came across it. And then we started kind of recreating the soundscapes for a project called Sintel, which, if you look on the courses page, you'll find the full course there. And they've also got a couple of other films that we had a look at. Sintel's definitely been the most popular, but Big Buck Bunny was another one. So freesound.org's a really good one. Off the top of my head, it depends how much money you want to spend. Really, there are some good ones out there, and if you go to Native Instruments and you've got enough money to kind of buy their full pack, then they've got some fantastic samples. Obviously, Logic and Cubase come preloaded with some good ones as well. So yeah, thanks for your question. You're the first one. Nice. That's brilliant. If any of you guys got any more questions, please don't hesitate to put one in. We can go. No, I think I'm going to call that a night now. If you've got any questions this week, please send me an email. We'll try and cover it. Next week, we are going to look at setting up the course. I'm going to do a complete teacher beginner webinar next week for the last one of this term, where it just basically goes over the equipment that you're going to need to set up music tech course for A-level music tech at your centre. We're going to go through the basic requirements and then some nice little fancy things that have helped me along the way. So that's going to be our next week's webinar. So please feel free to drop by, and if any of you advanced teachers have got any recommendations for that, please send me an email, just so, or even come and have a chat as well, and let's try and help get some of these new centres off the ground. Okay, so same drill as always. You can contact me on any of the other services. I hope you enjoyed tonight's webinar. Please catch us next week, and we'll see you then.